We have now arrived at the final panel for the summit. Throughout today's discussions, we've explored the significant impact AI has had on drug development in recent years. We delve into critical emerging technologies poised to shape the next decade. We examine the challenges still facing their adoption and consider their role in accelerating clinical trials. We also discuss the ethical and legal considerations surrounding the use of AI. While these insights have focused on the pharmaceutical and healthcare industries, it's worth noticing that AI has been transforming the discovery cycle and optimizing operations in other sectors for many years. Industries such as aerospace, Formula One, finance, internet search engines, agriculture, engineering, and retail have adopted AI more rapidly, in many cases, achieving clear impacts in areas like new product development and operational efficiencies. There is much more that we can learn from these additional and adjacent industries, and our panelists here today, having involved, while now they are involved in the life science industry, have a unique expertise in all these many industries that have been using AI for many years. So please, join me to welcome the next set of panelists. Usama Fayyad is the Executive Director at the Institute for Experimental AI at Northwestern University. Jacomo Corbo is the co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of PhysicsX. Also, he is very well known by being the co-founder of Quantum Black. Shweta Maniar is the Director of Strategic Industries, Healthcare and Life Sciences at Google. And last but not least, Rory Kelleher is the Senior Director and Global Head of Business Development at Nvidia.
Thank you.
Of course. So, to cover these topics about adjacent industries, I actually would like to start with Usama Fayyad. Usama, it would be great if you could please introduce yourself to the audience and actually tell us what is your perspective in the evolution of the use of AI since the times where you were the Chief Data Officer at Yahoo and then transitioning to become the Chief Data Officer at Barclays. With all these many leadership roles in these different industries, what are your thoughts in the use of AI over the many years?
Okay, so my journey in a minute. After the PhD at Michigan, University of Michigan, I went to NASA JPL in Pasadena, California, worked mainly with scientists on scientific data sets because in those days, only scientists had large data sets, and the picture has flipped. Got recruited by Microsoft into Microsoft research and product teams, where I worked with Satya Nadella and others, which is part of this story. Left Microsoft to do a couple of startups, got acquired into Yahoo. Yahoo, the title Chief Data Officer was given to me. They asked me, hey, what shall we call you? And I said, I'm only here for 2 years for my earnout, so I don't care. And I think it was Jerry Yang who said, oh, Chief Data Officer, that sounds funny. And everybody in the room laughed. That's how I became Chief Data Officer. But that gave me a very amazing sense of how quickly you can deliver value. So part of that acquisition was you're going to deliver 220 million of incremental revenue in 3 years. We ended up doing that in 1 year. That's how much data was valuable and kind of undervalued at Yahoo at the time. By the time I left, it was about $1 billion incremental. They asked me to do fun things like start Yahoo Research Labs and grow an amazing data team and so forth. Left Yahoo. Microsoft wanted me to go back. I didn't want to go back. So I ended up creating Open Insights, which is a company that exists still today. Its first mission, and by the way, the first client was Satya Nadella. The mission was to basically value data sets, working mostly with telcos, some financial services, and a lot of private equity and VCs. That exposed me to a lot of interesting situations in terms of what the latent value of data is in many, many different industries. And the quick journey here is ended up getting recruited into Barclays. My way of learning what the financial services was all about from the inside out, and their way of saying we're going to bring Silicon Valley to transform a 325-year-old British bank. It's now older by 5-6 years. That was a very interesting experience. On kind of by then, the chief data officer went from a joke to over 1,000 chief data officers in the industry. And most recently got recruited into Northeastern University, where back in a big way doing AI plus health, AI plus life sciences, and AI for climate and sustainability. So interesting exposure to a variety of problems and areas. The final conclusion here is I think AI is going to have a huge transformative role, but I think it's being misunderstood and overestimated by everyone. There is no intelligence in the AI of today. It is purely autocomplete on steroids in the case of generative AI, and a lot of very fancy regression that we call machine learning can be extremely powerful when you have a lot of data with many dimensions where humans are not very effective, and will have a huge impact on the knowledge economy simply because we created an economy around us. And by the way, in the US, that's about half the economy. An economy that's rife with work that is very robotic, repetitive, boring, is better done by machines, honestly. And I think we can free humans to do a lot of interesting things that after 7 decades of struggle in AI, we have not managed to get machines to be smart enough to do a lot of the things that humans do. I think machines will be smarter than humans in some very narrow, very focused problems. As well they should be. It's not a competition, it's actually a nice complementarity. So I'm very bullish on the future. I'm not as worried about what some famous folks worry about, the super intelligence and machines taking over the world. The current technology, I don't see a path where it would. But what worries me most is it's an amazing tool or a scary tool. Bad actors can create an upside down world where misinformation can completely overwhelm you, to the point where we live in a digital world, and we heard a lot of talks about it. You know, we are going to quickly head to a point where you cannot trust or believe anything you see, hear, or read online or on the mobile. And that's the scary scenario more than anything.
That is scary, for sure. And hopefully, as we were listening from our ethics and law panel, there are going to be new regulations and frameworks we can put in place to protect such information. Now, moving and continuing on the theme of data, Jacomo, I would like to ask you, can you please share your journey as engineer and having experienced data and analytics and the power of what AI can truly deliver in many industries? What is your perspective in the evolution of the industry, and how do you see the practicality of what we can achieve with AI?
So maybe I'll answer that by explaining just a little bit more about my background. You mentioned quantum black before. So I'm an electrical engineer in the first place, background in control theory, and I have a PhD in computer science. I got into Formula One. So I started my career in Formula One, being a big F1 fan on the one hand, but how I got into the sport was a little bit of a strange path. But I started in 2005 during the Fernando Alonso years at the Renault F1 team. So finding myself starting my career in F1, winning 2 double world championships, a wonderful way to start a career. But I was bringing certain techniques, really around algorithmic game theory to solving, an optimization problem, a kind of optimization problem, which is really around, it's an optimal stopping problem, it's a ranking game, it's race strategy in F1. And I spent a few years there, and one of the things I realized is as much as F1 teams are stacked with, really amazing engineering talent and people who know materials and composites and people who know control systems, vehicle dynamics, aerodynamics, they didn't know very much about a lot of the modeling techniques, data modeling techniques that I was otherwise taking for granted, and that's really more, around large-scale statistics and machine learning. And so, Quantum Black started really on the back of, an arbitrage opportunity that I saw. We started with 3 Formula One teams as anchor clients, and maybe one of the nicest things about working with F1 teams is the technical partnerships that they have with much larger engineering firms. And so, we had Boeing and Rolls-Royce Aerospace as anchor clients from 2010, and some of you may know there's a few folks from Quantum Black and from McKinsey here. Like, we started doing a lot of work with McKinsey in the first place in aerospace in 2011. We started working, on a big aircraft development program before starting to do work in other advanced industries and ultimately exited to McKinsey. And, Quantum Black is part of McKinsey today. The point is that, a lot, I'll share two important reflections. Like, one, that the frontier of what's possible is moving incredibly quickly. It's moved incredibly quickly over the course of the last 10 years or so, and it's moving more quickly today. Like, Steve Crossan, said we're in an exponential, uptick right now, and we have problems thinking and reasoning about exponentials. So one, the frontier of what's possible is moving very quickly, and two, how we realize what's possible, how we build what's possible is moving equally quickly. And those are two sides of the same coin. On the first point, I'll relate it to what PhysicsX is doing right now. So we're building, this is my next startup. We're a General Catalyst-backed company. We're, a little bit more than 125 people building physics foundation models. In fact, I'll share with this group here, a day before the news goes out, like we're, at reInvent a little bit, this is AWS's conference a little bit further up the road in Las Vegas. We're going to announce tomorrow the release of our largest foundation model. This is a geometry, it's a geometry and, CFD and FEA model for aeroelastic applications. And, delighted about that. But the point is that there is a revolution that's afoot in AI for the physical sciences, for physical systems. A lot of the things that around generative that we got very excited about with language models to start with, and then after that moved into multimodal foundation models, of the kind that Eric Topol described this morning. A lot of that has touched robotics in the last 18 months. So a lot of you may have seen that. A lot of the state-of-the-art ways of controlling robotics, of programming robotics, of solving a lot of, robotic control applications, tasks, that were implemented in a lot of different ways have been superseded by transformers, right? And these are really vanilla transformers. So we've learned how to build these things in these kinds of multitask architectures that have, that have yielded the sort of the state-of-the-art results for a lot of the other classes of problems. In the case of biology or chemistry or physics, that is also starting to happen. So when Quantum Black got going, one of the things that we were working on was trying to accelerate a lot of CFD workflows. So this is aerodynamic design. These are very long-run simulations. These are things where there are, approximations that you can't pick up numerically that you're otherwise trying to pick up in a wind tunnel. We were doing this for a large aerospace manufacturer. The idea of building surrogate models, to sidestep the hard problems of solving these nonlinear partial differential equations at scale is what we were trying to use machine learning for. Now, the reality is that we couldn't do it with any of the accuracy required by those applications. And there's about 15 years of sort of null results in the literature pertaining to, pertaining to that. It is only starting really around 2016, 17, with some advances in geometric deep learning that we have learned how to build models that are very good at learning physics, at being trained on numerical simulations, at learning the results of these nonlinear partial differential equations, and really, really at very high resolution, and in complex applications where there's complex initial conditions, complex boundary conditions, where we're talking about the very complex transients. So the kinds of turbulence that you find in things like combustion. The point is that has allowed us to do in the last few years things that we haven't been able to do, but have otherwise known, recognized as open problems and valuable problems to solve. And that is happening, in real time very quickly right now. And one evidentiary point around that is in 2016, as recently as 2016, there were 0 papers related to physics at NeurIPS. NeurIPS is one of the top machine learning conferences. It's taking place in Vancouver next week. And in this year's edition, almost 8% of the more than 4,500 papers accepted are tied to physics, right? So it is happening there. It is happening there because, the whole community is getting traction. It's also happening because a lot of the data sets required to be able to do this at any kind of scale are starting to be built and composed. And so, we can do things that we weren't able to do before. Like the other thing is how we build complex machine learning, how we build complex AI systems, that are deployed, that run in production. That is also something that looks dramatically different today than it did even a few years ago. We could have a long conversation about the software engineering of these kinds of systems, but the point is that it has never been more accessible to all sorts of organizations to build, to do the kind of to build software engineering systems, build software systems generally, but especially these kinds of software systems. The amount of complexity, the technical complexity that organizations have to take on is dramatically lower. Like these systems are, like the foundation models in particular, large, generative models, transformers, they are not just via copilots and whatnot, but I'm really talking about, at the level of, what this looks like as code. A lot of the complex functionality that were otherwise procedurally implemented, written as thousands of lines of codes, if statements, for loops, a lot of this is being, subsumed by the models themselves. They are, how do I arrive at functionality is a matter of, hyperparameter tuning. It's stochastic gradient descent that gets me to that answer. And so, this is also fundamentally changing, how quickly we can deploy complex functionality and how easy it is to maintain it.
So, Jacomo, I would love to stay in this topic just for a second, because you just mentioned the ability now to understand physics differently through all these new models and the speed by which we can analyze data. And I want to translate this to the biomanufacturing industry, making an analogy between Formula One, making an analogy between the turbines example that you mentioned, right? In the biomanufacturing industry, we are very focused in trying to optimize the way that we use bioreactors to manufacture cell therapies, to manufacture gene therapies. And there is a need for us to think about the future of smart biomanufacturing plants. So what do you think we can learn from all these models that you are describing in the adjacent industries, and what is the potential actually to use these models to optimize biomanufacturing?
Well, Eric this morning talked a little bit about digital twins, and digital twins is, it's a moniker that's been around for, a very long time, maybe a little bit infamously associated with the days of GE and GE Predix and Saint Ramon over here. Like all of it, for a long time didn't mean very much at all. But one of the things that we mean by digital twins is that we can really simulate in silico, a real world system. Like, really capture the state of a system, at the level of the individual, machine. Eric was talking about organisms, talking about people, but, we can also relate it to machines, to complex equipment. There is, our whole thesis, at PhysicsX is that, we believe that high fidelity physics simulation, the shape that it takes, the shape that the form factor of the compute of high fidelity physics simulation, the fact that it relates to solving lots of nonlinear partial differential equations on a mesh by finite difference, that is the thing that means that it's used in the way that it is, which is it relates to a category of software that people will talk as CAE. It's used in detailed design, so specific engineering workflows, but it's not used upstream of that in concept development. It's also not used downstream of that in manufacturing and production. It's not used for process control. It's not used for controlling, let's say, bioreactors. And that is an artifact of the fact that these things are incredibly compute intensive and they take lots of time to run. And so one of the things that changes in moving to AI models that run these things on inference is that, not only are they, somewhere between 10,000 and 1 million times faster to run now to do the prediction step, but we can actually solve for hard latency requirements. We can solve for, we can compile these models for different hardware endpoints, for certain memory constraints. What does that mean? It means that we can we can now use it in control applications without having to reinvent the whole control law, like just around being able to refer to something which tells me very precisely the state of that machine allows me to control it more effectively. And so this has huge sets of applications. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacomo. Another panelist that is here with us today and has a broad expertise in AI in different industries is Shweta Maniar. She started her career actually as a medical student, and today she's leading the healthcare and life sciences efforts at Google. So Shweta, would you mind to guide us through your career, how you went from being a medical student in the pharmaceutical industry and then transitioning to Google?
So I wish my story, actually I want this story where I started in Formula One, but I'll start with the medical student side. So I started actually even before medical school. I was actually at the Scripps Clinic working in orthopedics research, both translational and bench, and went and started medical school and thought, this is what I was going to do. So then I was in Cleveland at that time. And what became abundantly clear when I was in Cleveland is I had the opportunity to interact with the Cleveland Clinic Innovations, which is really, well, okay, now I can talk medicine, but it really is about how do you commercialize ideas? How do you think about the use of technology? And it was a very broad application of what I mean by technology. Some of it was very AI related, and some of it could have been as, and I say this with all due respect, as simple as a slightly different curvature of an implant, right, or some accessory device during a surgery. And I think that was the turning point for myself, which is I have the opportunity to now understand what are the needs of the industry. I had the opportunity while I was there and working in some organizations in Ohio and in Cleveland on how do we look at commercializing, spinning out medical device companies. How do we apply technology, particularly at that time, to organizations and to departments that really never thought that, they thought technology equals, the IT department of their organization. Since then, I joined, I came back to California and joined Genentech, or Roche, depending on who I'm talking to, and spending time really looking at what are the technology accelerators, what are the technology drivers of a typical pharmaceutical company. And I'm talking about 10, 12 years ago when it became a conversation of, well, does Genentech need to now start developing mobile medical apps because that seems to be the next thing that's going to diagnose my blindness? And so really was helping Roche think through how do we look at these technology drivers? Is IBM Watson going to be part of our silver bullet strategy? And really looking at what is the, frankly, how does, what is, Google pitching and what is Microsoft pitching and all of these, what are the technology drivers for a pharmaceutical company? This was looking at across the portfolio. And so I had these variety of experiences, which may not have seemed that it was a very linear path for myself, and suddenly made a lot of sense for Google to bring me over to help think through their AI strategy and how to apply their technology into the healthcare and life science industry. So the responsibility I have here now is how do we look at a variety of the capabilities that we have in-house, a variety of capabilities that we have through many of our partners, and apply that to the healthcare and life science industry globally. And so that's a very broad, healthcare and life science is a very broad category of the ecosystem. But it is not just looking at payers and providers, it's also looking at all sorts of life sciences, small, medium, and large, and also interacting a lot with the regulatory bodies and helping them understand what is the use of technology in their space, and how do we all shift as an ecosystem, and where does technology play a role?
Thank you. And actually, by being at Google, you have a very interesting perspective, because it's not only about healthcare
Right.
and life sciences. You are also exposed to other industries like the retail industry. And that's an unregulated industry. So can you just elaborate in your perspective and thoughts in the regulated versus unregulated industry, and how other fast and faster growing industries like retail are using AI?
So what's very amazing is that there's so much more commonality than there are differences. And I remember, right, being at Genentech, well, we're very different. We're a regulated industry. We can't play with this. And one thing I have seen, right, is there's so much that healthcare and life sciences can learn. That doesn't mean apply equally, right, but can learn from industries like retail, where where healthcare and life sciences can apply and take some of the learnings. And I think there's a few key learnings that we can, very carefully and safely learn from. I think that a lot of it has to do with speed and agility. And yes, I know that there's always a balance in our life science industry particularly, but retail has been looking at speed and agility, right? The other piece has been around personalization. Google has been, of course, such a master at looking at personalizing what are your search results based on what you have. If you're sitting in New York and searching for a doctor, a clinic, it's going to be giving you the microsite at the top of your search results is going to give you something based in New York, versus if I have the same search result here in San Francisco. And so the idea to be able to personalize the experiences that we have, I think that life sciences has been, particularly life sciences, has moved to a world of retail-like, and I say the word burden, but I also think it's responsibility. And that is, your end customer is no longer just your prescriber. Your end customer is no longer just who you're selling to. It's also thinking about the end user's experience, the whole ecosystem, and how they look at what the company is developing and the experience that they've provided. And so I think personalization is another one. I think we picked up a little bit on, digital twin, and I'll say supply chain has been a big piece that we can learn quite a bit. It was very interesting during the pandemic. Google had the opportunity to actually implement some versions of a digital twin when predicting around vaccine needs and usage during the pandemic, or the COVID-19 pandemic, and use that to inform the CDC and other government organizations on their supply chain and how to be ready. And so that was a very interesting use case. And then I said this retail-like burden. I would say the last thing that healthcare and life sciences can learn from the retail industry is that very heavy focus on the customer, right? The experience that they have, the loyalty that they have. Gone are the days where the doctor prescribes something and you say, yes, and I'm gonna go fill that exact prescription or get that exact implant or go to that exact referred doctor. Now we're sitting at home and researching on what do we want to go back to our doctor and say, actually, you know what, I've been reading, you prescribed me medicine A, but actually I've been reading about medicine B, and this is what I think, why I'm interested. And so really focusing on the end user and the customer, I think is something, massive learning from the retail industry and other industries, regulated industries like financial services, where they are continuing to focus and build on the user experience. And so, like I said, there was many more similarities than differences across industries.
If I can add to that one very quickly, I think the common theme here and why these problems are pretty much the same, but people don't recognize them, is that in very high dimensions, when we have a lot of variables, and if what you need is nonlinear approximation, humans are just terrible. We just do not function in high dimensions well. If we can bring it down to dimensions where we function well, we'll do much better than machines, much faster than machines. So what's been happening in all these industries, and I think it's particularly relevant in drug design, because the ultimate goal in the end is personalized medicine and precision medicine. And I think we're hitting an age where the dimensionality of the data permits it. We can't, our imagination can't imagine it. What's been shocking to me is a few simple nonlinear regression techniques that we call machine learning are able to find all sorts of simple stuff that is way more powerful than humans can find. And I think that's the theme here. And that's why we should be using it more and more.
Perfect, and this is a great transition, thinking about power, to our next panelist. And this is an organization that needs no introduction. Nvidia is at the mouth of everyone today. And Rory is the global head of BD at Nvidia. And I would love for you to share with all of us today. I'm going to ask the question slightly different from what we planned for the panel, but it's what it is that Nvidia can do and what Nvidia should do.
Thanks for the curveball. Appreciate it. So let me start by maybe just sharing a little bit about Nvidia. As many of you probably are familiar with the incredible performance that we have here. You probably know us either as a gaming company or a GPU company. And while those things are both true, it is certainly not the whole story. And so the whole story kind of tells why we are today where we are when it comes to AI. And so really what we've done is we've reinvented computing for the first time since the 60s, when a central processing unit x86 architecture was introduced. And so we pioneered this concept called accelerated computing, where we take the most computationally intensive parts of the code and move it to an accelerator, a GPU, right? But these GPUs make their way into systems. These systems make their way into server racks. These server racks fill up data centers and are connected by high bandwidth interconnects that fill up data centers 6 times the size of the room. That is the new unit of computing. It's a data center. And so really what we are in the business of is data center scale computing. And so when you talk about some of these models that some of my colleagues have already talked about before, like a Google Gemini or a ChatGPT, those are built and run on full data centers at scale. So it doesn't stop there, right? We actually have more software engineers at Nvidia than we do hardware engineers. And so full stack accelerated computing is exactly that. We don't just stop at the hardware. We're building system software. We're building acceleration libraries for developers to be able to introduce acceleration into a variety of different applications across a number of different domains. We're building, on top of the acceleration software, frankly, domain-specific libraries that address AI design and deployment problems across a variety of different industries that we choose to go to market in. And so I focus on healthcare and life sciences, but before I get into healthcare and life sciences, maybe I can just talk high level about some of the work that we're doing in different areas too, since we're talking pan-industry here. So one of the industries that we've chosen to go to market in, it's been probably a 10-year journey, is autonomous vehicles. And so we've built out a platform that we call Drive, that is an end-to-end system. We're never going to build an autonomous car. We're not an autonomous car company, but we'll work with the entire transportation industry to enable them to leverage this platform, build upon it, and take it to market themselves. In a similar capacity, we are probably the only robotics company in the world that works with every robotics company but does not build robots ourselves. We are building highly realistic virtual environments that obey the laws of physics, that can be a training ground for robots to be able to be scaled up in a virtual environment where you're training millions of robots at a single time, and then being able to extract the best performing robot brain, putting it into an embodied system in the physical world, and having it perform incredibly well, incredibly well. And so that's just another example of, you know, both tools and foundation models that we're building in domains to enable the entire ecosystem. Because we're not going to build the robots or build the cars, we're going to build the computing platforms that allow the rest of the ecosystem to build these end products. And so in a similar capacity, in the world of healthcare, we're building a platform that we call Clara. And so Clara is a collection of models, tools, APIs for developers that are looking to introduce artificial intelligence to the world of genomics, medical imaging, drug discovery, devices, and so on. And so it is through this platform that we really focus on three key areas in the healthcare space, and I want to briefly talk about those. One is digital instruments. And so this is really where NVIDIA's journey in healthcare started probably about 15 years ago. We were working with the diagnostic imaging companies like Philips, Siemens, GE, and so on, basically taking raw sensor data, using our computing platform to transform it into something that was interpretable by a human, an image, right? And today, we're not just working with all those same diagnostic imaging companies, but we're working with the entire universe of instruments, from microscopes to robotic surgery platforms to genomic sequencers and laboratory diagnostics and so on, effectively transforming their instruments into something that is software defined and AI enabled. If you think about what Tesla has done for the automotive industry, they've made the car software defined, and the innovation that they deliver to it over the air is increasingly powered by artificial intelligence. And so we're trying to do the same thing for the digital devices industry, if you will, which introduces much, much faster innovation, much, much faster delivery to clients and to patients, and then new business models, right? You have the opportunity now to become software companies, not just device companies. The second is digital biology. So if we do our job in digital instruments, we're now able to create digital biology data at scales and at resolutions that we've never been able to before. And those are gold mines for drug discovery, diagnostics, and so on. And so, as we've heard from some of the colleagues on other panelists today, you know, what we're seeing is the realm of drug discovery move from this artisanal approach to really drug design, which is really more of an engineering discipline. And I think what I found really interesting about today is, you know, many people set up on the stage and say, hey, that is effectively a solved problem. We have this molecular compiler that allows us to build molecules that have desired features or characteristics that we want. And really the other challenges are, what's going to happen when we introduce that into the human body? So predictive toxicology is an amazing place for artificial intelligence to add value, and there are active projects that NVIDIA and the ecosystem are working on this space. And selecting the right targets. Really what deep learning is this universal function approximator to take a high dimensional space and boil it down to an area that humans can understand in a better way. Biology is the perfect application area for deep learning. It's the perfect application area. And then the final area that we're focused on at NVIDIA is what I'll refer to as digital health, and that is everything about the patient and physician interaction, or the physician workflow, or the way that patients are interacting with the hospital system through the insertion of large language models or intelligent voice agents or even avatars that can represent a hospital brand and assist with things like booking appointments or with discharge or you know, things that are burdening both nurses and physicians and kind of causing burnout. You know, we heard Anthony Philippakis talk about companies that are, you know, focused on this explicit area. And so we are building the tools and computational platforms that allow AI developers, not just across the healthcare ecosystem, but across every industry ecosystem, to really drive forward what we're experiencing, which is the next industrial revolution.
Thank you. And I want to follow up on this, but before I go, I want to open to the audience in case anyone has a question. I cannot see. Oh, there is.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those impressive insights from other industries. And while I think it is evident that technology and concepts can be transferred to healthcare industries, we also learned throughout the day that it's not only about technology, it's also about culture, it's about ways of working, about how to think about an organization. So the question is, when you look at the different industries, what can healthcare industries learn from there? And maybe there's less of a question of startup companies in the healthcare space that have been built around AI and data from the get-go, maybe more for established companies that may need to pivot.
I'd love to start if I might. Look, the way that we work with customers very much involves us working closely with our customers, and the reason for that is because there's a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons is a lot of the promise of this technology isn't really about the tactical enablement of the individual engineer, right? It's not about having an individual simulation engineer or designer do the work a little bit differently, a little bit more productively. A lot of the benefit of moving to AI inference-driven models for, let's say, physics or chemistry simulation is really about changing an entire workflow, an entire process. If I take an example from automotive, the product development process in an automotive firm, reflects what today's tools look like. You have different functions where, you have a designer that's working on surfaces who will hand it off to a CFD engineer who will optimize it with respect to CFD, taking, material properties and, structure, as given inputs. And then they'll do a degree of optimization, and then after that they'll hand it over to an FEA engineer who will look at things like structural stress, and then after that they'll pass it off to another engineer who will be looking at NVH analysis, looking at vibration and noise, and they'll be using different tools, and each of these tools has their own meshes, their own performance requirements. But all of those individual handoffs are a reflection of the fact that they're operating on these different tools. There's computational, they're always straddling computational tractability, which is, like having to, on the one hand, to limit the runtime of these optimizations that they're doing, and at the same time, trying to think about how do they get to, a better performance. Now, what we are trying to move to is a place where a lot of, these models are multitask architectures. They can predict on different physics simultaneously. It means that I not only can do things a whole lot more quickly, I can also do them with respect to all the different physics or chemistry that I might care about against all the constraints that I might have. I don't have to navigate all these different handoffs in the way that I did before. And I think that's true in an automotive new product development process. It's also true of most of requisition engineering across a number of different industries. It's also true of manufacturing processes. It's true in so many different contexts across a number of different industries. And I think it's true of healthcare as well. Like, I think the way in which to think about the adoption of this technology to real benefit is about, having the courage to really do the hard work to rethink the processes, refactor the processes in virtue of what the technology allows.
Perfect.
And I know we're at time. I'll have a really quick one. I borrowed this from a chief AI officer at a leading pharmaceutical company who's thinking through, like, what is their AI strategy and how do we transform a company that's been around for hundreds of years? Build, buy, partner, acquire. Yep. If we have a unique data set and a unique ability to build something from it, we will build. If we have a unique data set but we don't have the unique capabilities internal, we will partner. If we see something that is strategic to us, that is existential, we will acquire. and build, buy, and buy wherever there's opportunities where it's not strategic to you, but you can get immediate value. Go out and buy from a vendor.
And I would
Absolutely agree.
I would add one sentence to that, which I agree with, is you cannot afford not to adopt it. This technology gives so much speed up that if you ignore it, competitors can completely change the market on you. So I would add that condition.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much. We are running out of time, but thank you so much, and please join me to welcome you back. Thank you.